On this China Unscripted podcast, we talk with activist Reggie Littlejohn about how her group flies under the Communist Party's radar to save lives, the unexpected impact of the one-child policy on the future of China, and China's bachelor villages, which aren't quite as awesome as they sound. Hi, welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley John.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
And I just want to remind everyone listening, give us a good review on iTunes, maybe 5 stars. I think that sounds like a reasonable number of stars to give us. Joining us today is Reggie Littlejohn, a wonderful China hand. Why don't you say hello and give a little introduction to yourself?
Hi. Okay, so I'm Reggie Littlejohn. I am the founder and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers. We are leading a worldwide movement to end forced abortion and the sex-selective abortion of baby girls. And also, we are unique in that we have a network on the ground inside of China that is directly helping save baby girls and abandoned and destitute widows.
So how does the Chinese Communist Party allow those organizations to exist inside of its borders?
They don't allow it. We are not officially registered with the government. I've discussed this with my network. They do not want to become registered because their feeling about this is that the Chinese government will, surprise, surprise, use registration to shut us down. So basically, we fly under the radar screen.
That sounds super cool.
Well, I think so. And I'm sure that the babies and the widows that we're saving think so.
I sure hope so. And speaking of that, I know you're working on, it's called Save a Girl, Save a Widow. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. So those are two campaigns that are run by the same network. As you know, sex-selective abortion in China is a huge problem, and I hope we discuss it in more detail in this podcast. But anyway, so the amount has varied, but the highest it was 121 boys born for every 100 girls born. I think it's gotten lower now, maybe 113 boys born for every 100 girls born, which has created this gender imbalance. And the reason for that is because of son preference. And Chinese culture is not unique in preferring boys over girls, but girls, especially second daughters, are selectively aborted and abandoned because even under the two-child policy, most people will allow the first girl to live, but if a family already has a girl, oftentimes they see that second slot as being their last chance for a boy, and they will abort or abandon that boy, or the girl, if it's a girl. The second pregnancy is a girl, they will abort or abandon her. So our Save a Girl campaign, we have a network on the ground inside of China that is able to find women who are being pressured, usually it's by their husbands and their mothers-in-law, to abort or abandon babies because they're girls. And we'll go to their door and we will say, congratulations on your baby girl. Girls are as good as boys. And unfortunately...
Whoa. Girls are as good as boys?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's the response. The thing that's really, one of the many things that's really tragic about the situation is that is such a radical message in the Chinese countryside. No one's ever said to them that girls are as good as boys. So we come to them with a message of encouragement, and then we tell them that we will help them keep their daughter by giving them a monthly stipend for a year. And what that does is it enables these women to go back to their husbands, go back to their mothers-in-law and saying, look, I can't abandon or abort this baby girl. She's a lucky girl. Look, she's already bringing money into the family, and we've been able to save hundreds of baby girls in this way.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it sounds like you're doing a lot of work in the rural areas, like pretty poor countryside areas.
Yeah. I would like to start a network in a city. And we're working on that. But yeah, this is rural. Our network right now is 100% in rural China.
Am I right in thinking that in the urban areas there is a little more of a preference for girls, or at least not as much of a prejudice against?
If there was a study in 2005 by the British Medical Journal that broke it down by province. And I don't know that it really breaks down by urban and, and rural. So I'm not exactly sure why some provinces have incredibly high, gender imbalances and others have less so. But I'm not sure that it would break down very firmly between urban and rural.
You're doing a lot of work in the rural areas, and normally when people think about China today or look at China as it's portrayed in the media, we're looking at, footage of the first tier and second tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou. A lot of the news is coming from those cities. And when people visit China as foreigners, they're going to those cities. But you and the people in your organization are visiting these rural areas. So what are they like in 2018? Are they also part of what the Chinese Communist Party says is the development of China?
I think that the rural areas have really been left behind in a lot of ways. China has become much more prosperous for some people in China. But in the rural communities, a lot of them are really struggling. And a big part of that struggle is because of the one-child policy. China traditionally was a farming nation, and in order to effectively farm, you have to have a large family. And because they've been severely limited in the number of children that they can have, a lot of the farming capacity has gone, way down. And not only that, but there's an enormous migration between rural and urban. So a lot of the young people are leaving the rural areas to try to get jobs that pay more in the urban areas. So, and this is a problem that has many different repercussions. So, for example, because there are fewer girls than boys, women of marriage age are upwardly mobile. So it's a lot of these women, they move out of the rural villages and go to the neighboring town or city to marry. So then they have a phenomenon called bachelor villages in some of the poorest area of China.
Those sound fun, right?
Yeah. where it's just a bunch of elderly people and men with almost no marriage age women. And that is in some ways, a recipe for social insurrection. And another problem that is caused by this is the abandonment of the elderly. So the people are moving from the countryside to the cities and just not supporting their parents. A lot of times, because of the one-child policy, has completely destroyed the family structure of China. So, for example, a couple of generations ago, before the one-child policy, in the countryside, a couple would have many children because they're a farming family, and each one of those children would have many children, and children were valued, and elderly were venerated, and the elderly, they would all live under one roof as like a big happy family, or maybe not as happy, but at least they were all together. And then when the elderly would take care of the grandchildren while the parents were working out in the fields or whatever. And then when the elderly got infirm, the family would take care of them. And it was a system that worked beautifully. Now we have a situation where you have a couple, marriage age couple, where they're each the only child of their family, so they have to support two parents in their age, or four parents, two each. One couple supporting four parents and 8 grandparents, meanwhile trying to support themselves and their one child or their 2 children, and they just can't do it economically. So the ones who are becoming the victims of this are the elderly. And the senior suicide rate in China has skyrocketed 500% in the last 20 years, where seniors they don't have anyone to support them. They've been abandoned by their families. They don't see any alternative, and they kill themselves. It's horrible.
This is literally Soylent Green, except they're not turning them into food.
Yeah, I mean, and so some of the most vulnerable of those are the widows. And you had asked me before about the Save a Widow campaign. Mm-hmm. So widows are particularly vulnerable because they are the ones who are raising the families as opposed to working. Widowers sometimes maintain the capacity to work. So their husband sometimes has died of a very expensive disease, leaving them with a great amount of debt. Or, sadly, a lot of times the husbands will kill themselves when they find out they have a disease. One of the things about China is you think, oh, it's a communist country, they would have socialized medicine. No way. You have to pay for your medical treatment in China. And so some of these men, when they have found out that they have cancer or they have heart disease and they know that they can't afford to pay for the treatment, they'll just jump off a bridge. It's just.
There is definitely the idea that you don't want to become a burden on the family.
Yes, and that actually is becoming really a problem in China. Like, for example, one of the widows that we just started supporting this month, she's sick, and her son told her, I don't know why he told her this, but he did tell her that her daughter-in-law, his wife, was yelling at him saying, why doesn't she just do the family a favor and kill herself?
Whoa.
So suicide is becoming almost normalized in some areas of China, where elderly is considered to be a normal thing and almost an honorable thing. It's like, I'm old, I can't produce anything anymore, and therefore I'm just gonna, do the best thing for my family, which is kill myself. And so we have started the Save a Widow campaign in the same area of China where we are saving baby girls. So we've got a network there anyway, and we have found, these widows that are very, very, very destitute and heartbroken and abandoned. And we come to their door and just say, we're here to help you. And just think of it. One of our widows is 92 years old. Her feet were bound. We actually had somebody whose feet were bound. And this is something that people don't realize, is that foot binding in certain areas of China existed into the 20th century. So, and she's lived through the violent takeover of the Chinese Communist Party, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, the one-child policy. No one has ever come to her and said, I want to help you because you need help. And they're just astonished. They don't understand it, but they're so disproportionately grateful for what we do. It's like we're the only ones who are helping them. So this is a wonderful thing to just restore dignity, to say to people, you are a human being. We believe that you're a human being created in the image of God, and you have infinite dignity and worth, and we're going to help you, and you do not need to do anything in return. We're just here to help you because you need help.
But don't you think the atheism of the Communist Party that has destroyed family in China, isn't that a better system?
Oh, yeah, it's much better. So let's talk a little bit about religious persecution.
Well, actually, before we jump to religious persecution, because I'm sure there'll be loads of time to talk about that. So it seems to me the Communist Party said, especially Mao said, that because China, in order to get control of the growing size of the Chinese population, they had to implement the one-child policy. Like that was good for the country. And that's the official line, that it was a necessary thing. And from what you're saying, it sounds like it actually destroyed the cellular level of Chinese society by destroying the family and created far more problems. So how do you respond to the official party line that it was a necessary thing versus what you've seen with infanticide and elderly suicide as some of the results of this?
I think it's just a lie, Chris. It was never necessary, because they had already had a voluntary program before they instituted the one-child policy. They had a voluntary program that said 2 is okay, 1 is best, 2 is okay, 3 is too many. Okay, under the Mao era, as I'm sure you know, Chairman Mao was saying people are the strength of China, and women were having about 6 kids per woman. And so then when Deng Xiaoping came in, he instituted the one-child policy saying it was necessary. But actually, they've had a voluntary program that I mentioned. 1 is best, 2 is okay, 3 is too many, and cut the fertility rate in half just with a voluntary program. They didn't even try to have a voluntary program saying just try to have 1 is best, 2 is too many. And then when you look at other places like Taiwan, they have just as low a birth rate as China, and they never had a one-child policy. So I dispute that it was ever necessary. And then the second thing I have to say about that is that even if there could be an economic reason for population control, it is never, ever right or necessary to drag a woman out of her home, strap her down to a table, and force her to abort a baby that she wants at 9 months of pregnancy. And that happened, I don't know how many countless times, millions and tens of millions and possibly hundreds of millions of times over the course of the one-child policy.
And that was by the government.
Yeah, by the government, right. We're talking about, something that drives me nuts is Americans who will, I will tell them about forced abortion in China, and they'll say, well, they really do have, a population problem over there. Okay, the answer to that is twofold. Number one, yes, they have a population problem. Their population problem is not that they have too many people, it's that they have too many old people and not enough young people to support them, and not enough women, too many men and not many men. That's the population problem that they have. And number two, if we had a population problem in the United States that was exactly the same as the one that China faces, I'll say to this, how many kids do you have? Oh, I have 2. All right. If we had a population problem that is exactly the same as the population problem in China, do you think it would be okay for our government to break down your door, go into your bedroom, grab you away from your husband, drag you down the stairs, and force you to abort your second child at 9 months? And you're like horrified. Oh, of course not. It's like, okay, then why is it okay in China? If it's not okay here, it's not okay in China either.
What's the response to that?
It's usually the end of the conversation.
If you want to end an uncomfortable conversation.
When I tell somebody about forced abortion and their response is, well, they do have a population problem, I just have to leave, because I just can't deal with it.
I think people don't really understand the idea of forced abortion, because abortion is such a
different
hot topic
thing
here, but like in a completely different context. So I like what you have on the website of your organization, where it's like forced abortion is not a choice.
Right. China's the only country where the pro-choice people and the pro-life people are the same people.
That's right. So having a choice in China would mean being free to have your child, free from government pressure for forced abortion, and free from familial cultural pressure to selectively abort your daughter.
It's anti-choice, anti-life.
It's totally, that's exactly right.
So are there any side effects to these forced sterilizations or abortions these women have to go through?
Well, there absolutely are. There's a study from China that has revealed that another victimization of women who've been forcibly aborted is actually breast cancer. So this study said, quote, induced abortion, which is what these are, significantly associated with an increased risk of breast cancer among Chinese females, and the risk of breast cancer increases as the number of induced abortions increases. Specifically, the study found that one abortion increases a woman's risk of breast cancer by 44%.
Whoa.
2 by 76%, and 3 by 89%.
Some of these women have had multiple. More than 3.
And that's right. And so every time you have an abortion, it increases your risk of breast cancer. So this study says that historically China has had a low breast rate cancer when compared with Western nations, but, quote, the incidence of breast cancer in China has increased at an alarming rate in the past 2 decades. And the study notes that the rise is, quote, parallel to the rise to the one-child policy. So the thing about it is that, in the West, we have elective abortion. In China, it's forced abortion. And so to me, the forced abortion itself is a crime against humanity for the mother and for the baby. But then 20 years later, when this woman in the countryside gets breast cancer, and they don't have the kind of care for breast cancer in the Chinese countryside that we have in the United States. I mean, it's basically a death sentence. To me, that is a second human rights violation that she will suffer as a result of the forced abortions that she'd had decades earlier.
Do you have a ballpark estimate for how many children have been aborted since the Deng Xiaoping era, the last 40 years?
I don't have to have. The Chinese Communist Party itself and this was years ago, so the number is much higher now. They said that they have, quote unquote, prevented 400 million lives through the one-child policy. Now, that number, 400 million, is greater than the population of the United States and Canada combined.
Wow.
And they broke it down. So they said, as I recall, it was something like 223 million abortions and almost 200 million sterilizations, all of which I would say were forced. No one agrees to be sterilized, especially the way they sterilize people in China. It's horrific. You know, the way I got involved with this work is I'm an attorney. I'm a graduate of Yale Law School, and I was, you know, an intellectual property and complex commercial litigator in San Francisco, but on a pro bono basis, I represented a Chinese refugee in her case for political asylum in the United States, and she had been forcibly sterilized. Now, what that means is that she had had 2 children, and so they wanted to make sure she didn't have any more children. She hadn't even violated the one-child policy or the 2-child policy. I think that in her area that you could have 2 children if your first is a girl. So they came to her door. They had sterilization quotas, so they must have been, and they had
the quota system.
Yeah, I know, the quota system. All right, so they came to her door like 12 cadres or something, some very large number of cadres would come to her door every day asking for her to have a sterilization. And she refused because so many of the women in her area were completely disabled by these sterilizations, because they don't give you, it's not like these forced sterilizations are carried out by highly trained gynecological surgeons, all right? They give them people minimal training. They send them out into the countryside to sterilize people. And so these women end up being butchered. And getting infections and losing their health. Like in my area where my network is, the women who've been sterilized, carrying water is considered to be a woman's job in my area. And you need to have a lot of strength to pump the well and to carry the water. And, you know, a normal number of buckets a day is something like 10 for the average household. And when women are sterilized, they go down from 10 buckets a day to like 1 bucket a day, and their entire family suffers. But my client was literally picked up physically, screaming and crying and begging, and carried to the hospital and not hospitals, some room somewhere, held down by hand, and they cut her open, tied her fallopian tubes. All this was without anesthesia. She said it was like somebody had taken a blowtorch and was blowtorching her on the inside. It was so painful. And then sure enough, she got a massive infection like many of the women in her area. And she ended up with chronic back pain, chronic abdominal pains, and chronic migraines for the rest of her life, or at least from the point where they were sterilized her to the point where I represented her, which was many years. And this is a common story. So just think of 200 million forced sterilizations. So that's my long answer to your short question.
And they brag about it, like, oh, we have forcibly sterilized 200 million people. Like, it's insane. Yeah. But so what you said begs a question. Like, how do they keep track of these women's fertility? Like, how do they know how many children someone has had? Like, I have heard stories that, like, your factory boss actually monitors the women's menstrual cycle. Like, is that true? Are they like...
Okay, so this is the thing, Chris. Things change, and I can tell you some stories of this. A woman who testified with me in Congress a few years ago. So I don't really know what the current conditions are. All right. So, you know, and by the way, we can discuss this further. Now they've realized that they're desperate for children, and they're almost sort of switching around and trying to really pressure people into having more kids. But they still have forced abortion. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, I have a woman who testified with me in Congress a few years ago, said that in her factory, that the women snitched on each other, because if a woman got illegally pregnant, and by the way, she had eight forced abortions. You know, if a woman got illegally pregnant, the entire work unit would get punished. And so the women were watching each other and reporting each other. And this is one of the things that the one-child policy has done, is it has really totally fractured human relationships in China, because especially at its height, you could be reported on by your neighbors, your friends, your family, your coworkers. They had people that they hired to just sit in the village square and look at people and stop people who looked pregnant. And so what that means is that there's no one you can trust. And if there's no one you can trust concerning, exposing your fertility and having you dragged in for a forced abortion, then there's no one you can trust to try to, form a pro-democracy, movement either. So it just completely fractures relationships, and so that society in China is atomized, and so they can't effectively organize people.
Now, you mentioned a change in the one-child policy. In 2015, they changed it to a two-child policy, and this year they started to say, oh, now you should have at least 2 kids.
Right.
So this has fixed the problem, right?
Well, okay, no, in 2 ways. Number one, there's there's still the issue of the huge gender imbalance, and the baby girls born now are not going to be marriage age for another 20 years. And
let's be honest, they might try and push that.
All right, yeah, 18 years. But then you're not going to solve the problem of the lack of support of the elderly. You're not going to solve the problem that for the first time China's workforce is actually in decline. So even if they completely abandoned all coercive population control, and even if they required everyone to have 3 children, the impact would not be felt for decades. And that's number one. Number two, even under the two-child policy, we have evidence of forced abortions. So it remains illegal in China for an unmarried woman to have a baby. So they're still subject to forced abortions. And third children still remain vulnerable to forced abortion. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Congressional Executive Commission on China, but they just came out with their report, which they do every October, that says that forced abortion is continuing on the provincial level, even though nationally they've declared this two-child policy.
So it's like they changed the policy, but it's still just as controlling as it always was.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like they still have a coercive population control policy. The new rule is every couple is allowed to have 2 children, which means you have to be part of a couple to fall into that law, and you can't have more than 2 children. So, and yet they're desperate for more children. So what they're trying to do is really pressure eligible couples. Like every eligible couple in China should have 2 children. It's kind of the message. But no one can have 3 children, and no one can have a child without, if you're not married, unless you're rich. Okay, so there's exceptions for people who are rich that can pay these exorbitant fines. So I spoke at the Heritage Foundation, I think it was just last year, with a woman who was unmarried and who was forcibly aborted. I believe it was at 7 months. And they had given her the choice of, the so-called choice of paying this fine, but the fine was just so far beyond her means that she couldn't pay it. In some areas of China, these fines can reach 10 times a person's annual salary. So that's not really a choice. But then when they give you that so-called option, and then you say, I can't pay it, then they say that's a voluntary abortion because you could have paid the fine, when actually you could not have paid the fine.
One of the weirdest things I found, and like the most things about this population control, like the family planning commissions, that they actually are used as revenue generators for local provinces. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a problem. Obviously, because so the thing is, I just mentioned these fines to you, right? So when people do pay the fines, then the money goes into like a black hole because there's no accountability with respect to that. So we have no idea where the money has gone or what it's being used for. But yeah, it's a big revenue generator, and that might be part of the reason that on the provincial level, they still have regulations that require a forced abortion, or remedial measures is what they call it, if there's an out-of-plan pregnancy, which means somebody's unmarried or it's a third child.
So I'm curious, Shelley, how do you feel hearing this? Because you have a sister because your parents moved to the U.S.
Well, it's actually interesting because my parents were from rural areas, but not incredibly poor rural areas. Like they were, like when they had me, they had moved to a city. And then my mother, like, you know, it was in the 80s, so it was the one-child policy, and she got an IUD because that's what they automatically did. Like, it wasn't that she had decided to take this form of birth control. It was that they were like, you've had your child, now you get an IUD to make sure you don't have a kid anymore. But, like, years later, after we moved to America, she had my sister, but it was an accidental pregnancy. Like, IUDs
This
are
isn't going to be
supposed to
shocking
have...
for your sister to hear, right?
She knows this.
Okay.
But like IUDs are supposed to have like a 99.6%, something really high.
She's a 0.1%
Yes.
miracle.
It was an accident. So if we had been in China, then there's probably I would not have a sister.
Yeah. And when you phrase it as in China, you were not allowed to have a brother or a sister. It's shocking.
The people of that generation, like born in the 80s and 90s, mostly you do not have, unless you're in certain areas or have, or are a member of an ethnic minority, or you have a lot of money.
Right. That's right.
I mean, you got to make sure that people with money can opt out of the system.
Well, the main way one of the many ways that the rich people opt out of the system is that they can come over to the United States or some other country and have their baby overseas so that baby would be, for example, a U.S. citizen.
And so this even ties into birth tourism then.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. And California is a big state for birth tourism. And so the woman comes over to the United States, has her baby here, and so then that baby is not a Chinese citizen. So what that means is when she goes back to China with the baby will not have hukou. But if you're that,
can you explain what hukou is real quick?
Right, hukou is household registration. So every legal citizen in China would have hukou registration, and without it, you cannot a kid cannot have get free education. They will not be able to get a passport. They will not be able to officially work. They will not be able to officially marry. They basically have no official existence. And so that's what happens with some babies that are hidden by their parents. Like people say, why do they just hide their babies? Well, some of them do hide their babies. And then the kid grows up, in this never world of having no official existence and not being able to hardly do anything with their lives.
It's like being undocumented, but in your own country.
Right. It's like you're a non-documented person or even an illegal person in your own country.
It's like the opposite of birthright citizenship.
That's right. Absolutely.
And so you're saying if a wealthy family in China, if they go to the U.S., have their child there, they are exempted from this system.
Well, they're not exempted from the system. It's just that their child is an American citizen, not a Chinese citizen, and therefore doesn't count against the one-child policy.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so great to be wealthy. I wonder what the impact is on a society. Well, obviously there's lots of bad impact, but just to have a generation of people who are all only children. I'm an only child, and I've been told my whole life only children are inherently selfish, which is not true. I'm a very giving and loving person. Right, guys?
The silence is deafening, Chris.
Yeah, also heartbreaking. But yeah, I wonder what it is like to have a nation of only children, for the most part.
Well, they've studied this, and I'm sure you know that they call them little emperors because they're used to having all of the attention of their four grandparents and their two parents on themselves. And what it does is it causes problems in later life. So China's marriage or divorce rate is really skyrocketing because you put two little emperors together and you don't have the give and take that you need in a marriage. And I also remember reading somewhere that these little emperors don't make very good employees, and so they get fired. There's just a much higher termination rate or inability to keep a job because they can't. They don't understand that they're not going to start out as the CEO. You have to work your way up, and you have to do some grunt work, and you know along the way, and they just, they don't make it in terms of being good employees.
Well, I have to say that the flip side of being a little emperor is having all the burdens of the 2 parents plus 4 parents, grandparents placed on 2 people. So you basically, if you're not a success, you can't afford to support all of your parents and grandparents, that's a huge burden to place on people.
Yeah, I can't take care of my parents, so they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Man, it's amazing how if you attack the fundamental traditional family structure, just how quickly society falls apart in so many ways.
Yeah, it's really horrible, and it's just wrong for our government, like the atheist government, to play God. I mean, that's basically what they're doing, and now they're suffering for it.
And of course, the solution to all the problems is to put more coercive family planning or societal measures in place, trying to convince women to marry younger.
So they're not leftover women.
Yeah.
You know something, Shelley? I don't think there is a solution. What can they possibly do? Like I said a few minutes ago, even if every woman in China had 5 kids, it's too late. It's going to be too little too late because of how long it takes those kids to grow up and start being productive members of society. So I really don't know what China is going to do. I do worry about the elderly. I worry about, euthanasia, just like they've practiced forced abortion. Once this elderly problem gets out of hand, there's that. But then a lot of times the seniors are just taking care of it themselves by killing themselves. So
forced euthanasia is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
yikes.
It's like, you and I, what can we do? We do our best to expose the problem, make it as public as possible. In my case, I have this network in China that's actually saving the baby girls and saving the widows. It's a total drop in the bucket, but it's like you can only do what you can do.
Is your network in China, are they in danger for doing what they do? I mean, it sounds pretty innocuous to us here, right? Like they're just offering monetary support to people.
Well, see, the most innocuous thing can put you in danger. So I'm sure you remember those women several years ago who were organizing to stop sexual harassment on public transportation.
Right.
They were just incident, and that's innocuous. I mean, who's in favor of sexual harassment on public transportation? And yet they were all detained. And so the only thing that we can think of as a reason for detaining people who are trying to do something that was a public good is that the Chinese government is so paranoid of anybody taking any initiative of any sort and organizing anything that they'll just detain you. I mean, if you organized a rally and the rallying cry was, "We love the CCP and we want it to exist forever," you would still get detained because they didn't organize it and you did. And so you have the power of organization and they're totally threatened by that. So yeah, what we're doing is innocuous and it's also dangerous because it's organized.
Also, I think anything that shows that the party is not actually taking care of the people the way it says it is just, it makes them look bad. They don't like looking bad.
Yeah.
So do you think there's any possibility in the near future we'll see the Communist Party officially ending these coercive population controls?
Well, yes and no. So they have been making noise about saying that they're going to end coercive population control, but you have to really watch the wording, because if they say we are now going to allow all couples to have as many children as they want, then no doubt the mainstream media is going to say, yay, all coercive population control in China has ended, when it actually has not ended, because you have to be a member of a couple in order to qualify for that. So according to the Chinese government, at one point I read that most of the forced abortions, they don't call them forced abortions, most of the abortions that they have are from single women. And so it's really important for the wording to be that all people, or at least all women, can have as many children as they want, and not all couples. Because as long as that word couples is in there, then they are still going to be able to have forced abortions.
And I assume that means like married couples.
Right. And this is another problem, Chris, is the definition of marriage. Okay. So I know of situations where a woman and a man would marry each other according to the customs of the village. So they'd have a big party and they'd have some kind of a ceremony, and then she would go and start living in his parents' house. And so everybody regards them as being married, but they did not go out and get that official marriage certificate because those are expensive and they couldn't afford it. And so then she gets pregnant and the government says, you're not married, and drags her out for a forced abortion. So that's another layer of problem.
Well, when you got to meet the quotas.
What I'm saying is, that I do think that the Chinese government is going to be forced, just because of demographic reasons, to announce the end of the two-child policy. But watch the wording. Does it say all couples can now have as many children as they want, or does it say all people or all women can have as many children as they want?
That's very important. Thank you.
Now, there's one solution that you talked about before solution in quotes, to deal with the fact that there's, about 40 million more men than women. And that's bringing in women from other countries.
Right. That's not a solution. That's a problem. I mean, that's human trafficking and sexual slavery. So that is one of the big negative unintended consequences of the one-child policy, is that women are being trafficked within China and also from surrounding countries, and are becoming sex slaves. So China was rated this year as a tier 3 nation in the TIP report, the Trafficking in Persons report, which means that it's, number one, a major destination for the trafficking of women, and also just human trafficking. There's trafficking for labor also. And number two, that the Chinese government is not doing enough to combat it.
I assume tier 3 is worse than tier 1 and 2?
Right, exactly. Tier 3 is the worst.
Oh. Lovely.
So where are these women typically coming from?
Well, they come from the surrounding nations, Vietnam, Cambodia. I mean, there are people who are coming from as far away as even Africa and Central and South America. But the ones that really tear at my heart are the worst are the North Korean women who are trafficked, because if human rights is worse anywhere in the world than China, it's North Korea. And so people risk their lives to get over the borders to flee a horrendous situation and hope for a better life. And in the case of many women and girls, they get sucked up immediately into the sex slave trade. And there's nothing they can do about it. They can't go to the Chinese authorities and say, I'm being raped, I'm being tortured, my life is in danger, because the Chinese authorities will characterize them as illegal economic migrants, and they will repatriate them to North Korea, where they could end up in a labor camp and being executed, or just dying in a labor camp, and even other members of their family can as well, because it's considered treason from North Korea's perspective to leave and to go to China. So I mean, these women are just some of the saddest people on the face of the earth, and I want to start helping them as well. So I'm trying to find a partner to help save women and girls on the North Korean border from the sex slave trade in China.
When you say a partner, what would that be?
It would be somebody who has a network on the North Korean border, who has the ability to actually help these women. We do not have a network on the North Korean border. That is some of the most heroic work in the world, is getting out there on the border between China and North Korea. You have to have a lot of courage.
I have a question, which is there any attempt to use other methods that aren't forced abortions or forced sterilizations to help keep like the two-child policy in place? Like, is there attempts at sex education or like contraceptives?
Well, there's forced contraception. I mean, everything's coercive, So, in fact, you mentioned yourself that somebody that you knew from China that was given an IUD.
Yeah, I mean, that's my mom.
Yeah,
my
your
mom.
Yeah. So they have forced IUD insertion. So there is forced contraception as well.
But it seems like that must not be very, like, it seems like this is not really standardized across the board. Like, in some areas you might have forced contraception, in other areas there's a lot of forced abortion and sterilization. Do you see that?
I agree. Nothing is standardized across the board. The Chinese government doesn't have the kind of reach in terms of enforcing standardization that, for example, the American government does. And the Chinese government might say, well, this is the new law, and then you've got these people out in certain different provinces that are not following it. So in terms of forced abortion, forced sterilization, forced contraception, it's enforced differently in different areas of China and differently at different times. So that, for example, one year, a woman in a province who has an illegal pregnancy might be forcibly aborted because they're having a strike hard campaign. Whereas the year before, if she'd been in the same situation in the same place, she might have been able to get away with paying a fine because they weren't having a strike hard campaign. So it doesn't, wherever you are geographically or in terms of time, either way, the results can be completely different.
Yeah, that's kind of goes with the way that the Communist Party basically runs everything through political campaigns. So it's less about like actual management, but more about like, well, now there's a campaign going on, so this is happening at this time versus, right, another time. Are there people in China, like Chinese people, who are trying to help the women who have forced abortions or sterilizations? And if so, what's happening there?
That's a really good question. And I think that the answer, as far as I know, is no. I have not heard of any effort on behalf of the government or anyone else to try to help people deal with the fact that they've had a forced abortion or a forced sterilization. I think that the general attitude of the government towards women who have these procedures is that they were doing something that was illegal, and therefore they were criminals, and therefore, of course they had to have a forced abortion or a forced sterilization. So it's their problem, and the government's not going to help them pick up the pieces after something like that.
And I would imagine civil society would also have problems. One, people just might not even know it's an issue. And two, if they organize, well, there you go.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, there's the case of Chen Guangchen, right?
Oh, yeah, you have a story about Chen Guangchen, don't you?
Yeah, well, but which story are you talking about? I mean, I basically led the international movement to free Chen Guangchen, and that was could write a book about that. And now he's one of my best friends, and he lives in Maryland, where I live. So we see each other pretty frequently, several times a year. So what story did you want me to tell?
Oh, well, Chen Guangchen had basically originally gotten in trouble with the Chinese Communist Party for trying to help women who had these forced abortions, right?
Yeah, Chen Guangchen, as your listeners may know, was he was not born blind, but became blind at age 3 because of an illness, and became a lawyer. They call him a barefoot lawyer because he just basically taught himself law. And in the beginning, he was doing things like helping disabled workers with disability rights, and he was actually given an award, I think, by the Chinese government for his work. But then when he turned to helping women who were victims of forced abortion, then they just came down on him with a ton of bricks. And I would say also that it wasn't just Guangcheng himself, also his wife, Wei Jing. They would go out into the villages at night. She would put her baby to bed and go out with him into the villages at night to interview people about what was happening there. And together they were an extremely courageous couple.
And then for that, he basically got put under house arrest.
Oh, well, before he was put under house arrest, he was put in jail. He was in jail for years. And then after they finally let him out, he was in a very weakened condition. He had dysentery and untreated. And then they put him under house arrest with his wife. Then they tortured them both and broke some of her ribs. Would not allow, at first they were living with his mother and she would go out to get food for them, and then they would not allow her to go out anymore to get food for them. So we were really worried that he was going to starve to death, especially since he already had, I think he had dysentery, he had some kind of a intestinal problem. So there was a lot of worry about that.
Well, so he escaped, though, eventually to the United States.
Yes, he did escape it. I mean, if you want me to tell the story of his escape, I can do that. There's so much there that that's another one that really should be its own podcast.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Reggie. If anyone listening wanted to learn more about what you do or how they can help, what should they do? Where should they go?
So my website is womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. That's womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. But if you just, Google my name, Reggie Littlejohn, you'll come up with it. And what people can do to help is, of course, they can like our Facebook page. They can follow me on Twitter. But you can also, we are the only organization where you could actually get your personal donation dollars into the hands of either a woman who is struggling to keep her daughter or a widow who's destitute and abandoned. So if you go on my website, womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org, on the top page to the right, there's a button that says Save a Girl and then Save a Widow. Click on either one of those, and they will take you to those campaigns, the Save a Girl campaign or Save a Widow campaign. And you can, whatever donation you make, if you write in the memo, Save a Girl or Save a Widow, then that money will go straight into our China account, and that will go towards that program in China to save girls or save women, or widows. We're the only way that you can actually do that.
And how far does a donation stretch?
What we ask people to give whatever they can, but what we give the widows and the families of the women $25 a month in yuan. And
so that's 25 yuan?
No, $25.
$25 in yuan, got it.
In yuan, yeah. So you give $25 and pretty much all of it or most of it will go into the hands of the women. That we do pay our field workers. So because these people are doing it full time, and it's very, very brave work, because if they get caught, they're at extreme risk. So it will either go to a field worker or, but the vast majority of it will go into the hands of the women themselves.
Well, that's incredible. I think it's a great work what you're doing.
Thank you. I do too. I'm grateful that I'm able to do it. It's really hard to get a network in China, and for those who pray, I would ask you to pray that we will continue to escape the notice of the authorities.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely horrible, but really good. It was a pleasure having you on.
It's a pleasure to be here, and you guys are doing a great work as well.
Well, thank you so much. And to everyone listening, thanks for listening to China Unscripted. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. 6 if they'll let you. Talk to you next time.